Cheers! Yeah! What an honor to have you here tonight. And thank you all for being here. My name is Nikki, this is Michelle. We are the Liminal team. We also have a reading on Saturday at Always Lounge, featuring Charisma Price, Maurice Carlos Ruffin, and Kirsten Renault. It's going to be really great. Sunday, 6 p.m. at Always Lounge. It's going to be a really great reading. And Jorge is reading next month at that reading series in April. So, yeah, we've got lots of amazing people in the room tonight. All right, without further ado, Allison, Alsup, is an award-winning writer, teacher, and editor. She holds an MFA in fiction from Emerson College. Her short stories have won multiple contests and appear, among other places, in the 2014 O. Henry Prize Stories and the UK's 2018 Manchester Fiction Prize shortlist. Her nonfiction and best food writing 2015. Her debut novel, Foreign Seed, is to be published next summer by Keylight Books, and imprint of Turner Publishing, reserved for works believed to have cinematic potential. The Apple TV show. As co-founder of the New Orleans Writers Workshop, Allison has taught a multitude of classes, helped hundreds of writers to hone their craft and achieve their creative writing goals, whether that be revising a story, seeking a first publication, or applying to MFA programs. She also mentors writers individually on projects ranging from short personal essays to full-length novels. Allison firmly believes that engaging with creative expression, whether our own or that of others, not only serves to explore the human condition, but is what defines the human condition. Give it up for Allison.
I want to make sure that everyone can hear me and that this microphone is at the correct angle. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. I am not going to read from the novel that was finally purchased. I am really feeling, because it took 2.5 years, and I'm really feeling like I want to get back to the material that I set to the side. And so while the novel that has been purchased is probably more quietly poetic and might feel like the more obvious choice for poetry and pie, I'm going to read something that feels decidedly not poetic. And as a result, Daniel's work will seem even more so. This is my gift to you. So just a tiny setup here. This is from a novel in progress that is somewhat speculative in that it is set in a non-disclosed Eastern European-like country during a Cold War-like time. And this is a little bit of backstory stuff that I have been exploring. The main character, our highly questionable hero, is named Vigo. And if I had to put a time frame on this story, I would set it in the 1970s. Okay? I'm not sure that there's much more that you need to know, except that their country has been invaded by a Russia-like entity, and they now live under a totalitarian regime. He also has an older sister named Sonia. That's it. Okay. There's a few also F words and 4-letter words in here. Again, less than poetic, but here we go. All right. I'm trying to figure out the best way to say this. Maybe I should turn this way. Vigo leaned into the chain-link fence at the edge of the parking lot. He was waiting for Oleska. The factory loomed ahead, an imposing monolith of corrugated tin and cement blocks. It was still a few minutes before closing, and plumes of yeast-smelling smoke rose from the stacks, the powdery traces of which cast an ashy veneer of neglect about the place. Years ago, the building had churned out armaments for the war. Now the assembly lines produced kitchen goods, soup pots, cake pans, and tea kettles, all of which seemed far too quaint to have been birthed from such a miserable spot. The din of cart engines rose from the surrounding streets. It was rush hour, and Vigo's stomach was making noises. He hadn't eaten since lunch. He'd been too distracted, pacing his cramped student apartment and debating what to wear. He'd nearly opted for a surplus flak jacket and lace-up boots, only to change his mind at the last minute in favor of a wool sports coat and crewneck sweater combo he donned for mock trials at the law school. Now his empty gut felt like a weakness, and he wished he'd just shoved something down to solidify himself. He checked his pocket. The knife was still there. He'd inherited it from his grandfather, and the blade was long enough to gut a large fish. Usually it sat in Vigo's desk drawer, nestled among the pens and paper clips. He wasn't sure why he brought it. Never had he wielded a weapon against an animal, let alone a human being. But now the knife was here, a tangible possibility. Suddenly, the whistle blew. The front door swung open, releasing a babbling current of workers into the cool April dusk. He watched for Aleska as the crowd surged through the opening, then dispersed. Some heading towards the bus, others for the subway, a small number towards the hub of parked cars. Sonia emerged midstream, flanked by two other women. His sister wore a blue fabric coat, an old cast-off from their mother that hung open over her uniform. Even from a distance, Vigo could see her eyes look shaded, her skin sallow. She was turned towards the street and didn't spot him along the fence. But even if Sonia had glanced his way, Vigo doubted his face would have registered. His sister had no reason to expect him here amidst the roving bodies, no idea of his decision to confront Aleska. The trio of women paused, pulling off their headscarves and stuffing them into their purses. One of the other two lit a cigarette. Sometimes his sister told him stories about her workmates, and he wondered if they knew. The three of them laughed before Sonia left with a faint wave and walked, hands in her coat pocket, towards the subway. She wasn't showing yet, at least not from a distance. But Vigo could discern the change. His sister's girth was softening, expanding. Even her stride looked different, laden with a heaviness about the step. The number of workers trickled until the double doors stilled and no one else came out. Vigo wondered if he'd somehow missed seeing Aleska among the crowd. Still one car waited in the lot and a few lights remained on inside the building. Aleska was a supervisor. It made sense he would be the last to leave. So Vigo stayed along the fence, smoking in the shadows like a spook, and pondering how many times Aleska had used his position to have Sonia stay behind after everyone else had exited. He pushed the thought away. Even the name itself, Aleska, sounded oily like the fake margarine people spread on toast whenever the stores ran out of butter. He was nearing the end of a cigarette when the inside lights cut out. By then it was nearly dark. Several bulbs clicked on, sending down bright cones onto the asphalt. Vigo dropped his smoke just as the doors reopened and a figure emerged. A man stepped into the building's floodlights, cricking his neck back and forth. He lit a cigarette, staring into the obscurity and not seeing Vigo some dozen meters away at the periphery of his sight. The guy wore wool trousers and a tight black leather jacket with wide lapels that struck Vigo as pimpish. He was almost certain it was Aleska. Sonia kept a blurry snapshot of the two of them cheek to cheek under a magnet on her fridge. The actual Aleska was stocky, of medium build, with thick greaseback hair that hung to his shoulders like an aging soccer player, or maybe not even that. Vigo thought, more like an aging soccer assistant manager. Aleska took a few drags, then tossed his cigarette, scattering sparks. He withdrew something from his pocket, keys possibly, and locked the double doors before walking towards the last car in the lot. Vigo stepped away from the fence, quickly closing the distance between them. He no longer heard the traffic or smelled the chimney stacks. Only Aleska remained, just ahead. Vigo called out. Aleska halted. He turned around, narrowing his eyes and trying to locate the voice. Who the hell are you? Vigo Pritzky. Who? Vigo repeated himself, punching his family name. He refused to mention Sonia. It would only cheapen her more. Right, the little brother in school. Can I help you? Aleska asked in a way that made it clear he'd never helped anyone in his life. They were no more than a few meters apart now. At this range, Aleska looked older, maybe 37 or 38 to Vigo's 25. His shoulders were thick, verging on hammy. Stripes of gray hair hung from his temple. A shadow beard edged his jaw, a trick to make it look sharper than it really was. It saddened Vigo to think his sister had fallen for it. He wasn't sure what he'd been expecting, some superlative specimen perhaps, given the risk that Sonia had taken with such an affair. Instead, Oleska was a guy like any number of others, just good looking to be number one in his neighborhood bar, but not beyond. I know all about it, Vigo said. About what? About what happened between you two. Oleska made a point of looking him up and down, and Vigo wished he'd worn the flak jacket and boots. She send you here? No, I didn't think so. Oleska flicked his hand. Go home and study. Vigo stepped forward. It's not going to be so easy as that. There's a problem. It needs a solution. I'm sorry to hear that, Oleska said, as if this were news to him, as if Sonia hadn't told him about the baby. Whatever it is, I hope your sister takes care of it. You need to take care of it. Vigo's hand was raised now, pointing. Oleska rocked on his boot heels, his hands closing into fists, then shook his head. I'm not sure what your sister's been telling you, he said with a tight smile, but you should know that she likes to make up little stories, fantasies. She's very good at it. Now, if you don't mind, I'd advise you to get the fuck out of my way. There are tests, you know, Vigo said, ways to prove things. Oleska shrugged and continued towards his car. Meanwhile, bile, black and bitter, pooled in Vigo's empty gut. The shrug had come to him naturally, effortlessly. He imagined Oleska using the same gesture on Sonia, her reaching out, him brushing her off. All at once, Vigo understood the pointlessness of his task in coming here, of thinking that he could give his sister what she wanted, to get Oleska to acknowledge the baby, to step up, to do the right thing. That wouldn't work. Oleska wasn't a lover, just a garden variety fucker, a shrugger of responsibilities and no doubt always would be. One thing was certain, the guy wasn't keeping a picture of Sonia on his fridge. Vigo could feel the plan shifting. He didn't want Oleska anywhere near the baby, his sister, his family. If Oleska ever tried, Vigo would cut the bastard down. He clipped his hands inside his pocket and he felt for the knife, just to make sure. I'll file a report, he called, moving fast now. Oleska was nearly at his car. The sedan was older, but in good shape. A German make known for its excellent speed and handling. It made Vigo furious to look at it. Don't think I won't. Go ahead, Oleska said over his shoulder, revealing a smug grin. As I recall, your sister wanted it. Vigo knew Oleska was trying to goad him, to make him lose his temper, but Vigo wouldn't. His law professors had trained him too well. Doesn't matter, he said, and let go of the knife in his pocket. You're her supervisor. You and I both know that changes things. They were standing close now, caught in the beam of a floodlight above. Oleska pursed his lips. They were curved, like a girl's, no doubt another thing Sonia had fallen for. Oh yeah? They teach you that in school? As a matter of fact, they do, Vigo said. It was true. There were explicit rules against abuses by supervisors, just as it was true they were broken all the time. Still, every once in a while, the powers at Central undertook and made an example of someone. Always a man, some boss taking advantage of a female worker. If need be, Vigo would see to it that Oleska fell into this category. Look, kid, I nailed your sister, all right? Get over it. Oleska reached into the pocket of his leather jacket, and for a moment, Vigo thought Oleska might have his own knife. But out came a set of keys. A white rabbit's foot dangled from the chain. Somehow the charm made Vigo even angrier than the German sedan. He knew Oleska's type, the kind whose good luck came at the expense of screwing over everyone else. The door locks thumped, and Oleska opened them. Vigo stepped forward, gripping the metal frame to keep it from closing. He and Oleska stood face to face, their bodies separated only by the car door. Oleska tugged, but Vigo kept his hold. Oleska's face tightened. He stepped away from the sedan, the key still dangling from the lock. Vigo followed until there was nothing but empty asphalt between them. Oleska's arms were bent, slightly crooked. Suddenly he reached for Vigo's chest. The push was hard enough to make Vigo stagger backwards. What the hell do you want? You broke the law. Oleska shook his head. No law against sex. Sleeping with a subordinate. Exploiting a female worker. The words bubbled up no doubt memorized for some school exam, but once they were out, Vigo knew they were correct, the exact language of the official code. As a supervisor, you should know it's not allowed. Oleska stared at Vigo, his dark eyes glinting and reptilian. For a moment, neither said anything. A pack of sirens wailed in the near distance. Oleska swayed slightly, then lunged, grabbing Vigo by the collar and swinging him backwards in blur. Vigo felt his feet leave the ground. Another second and his spine smashed against the car. Oleska was pushing him down, bending him backwards over the fender. Vigo's skull collided with the hood, making a metallic crack. Light flashes came and went. When he opened his eyes, Oleska's hot frame towered over him. The floodlight caught the side of Oleska's face. A clump of hair had fallen from the rest and hung like an oiled rope. Vigo attempted to push him away, but Oleska's legs pressed him hard against his thighs, pinning him to the car. Oleska's hands were at his throat, cutting his breath. Vigo struggled to find the ground, only to have his feet meet with air. The knife was there, so close, but he couldn't reach it. Oleska's gut was on his, blocking his pocket. If it hadn't been, Vigo would have stabbed him, run the blade across his neck. Spittle landed on Vigo's cheeks. Oleska was growling threats about breaking him. Oleska pulled him up. The lights bounced as Vigo's head smacked against the hood 3-4 times. How many, Vigo didn't know. His mind sunk into a pool. He couldn't think. Years before, a soldier from the tanks had strangled their cousin Piotr to death in the park across the street from their apartment. He and Sonia had seen it. She was 15, Vigo 11, and now Vigo was sure Oleska would kill him right then and there. The thought made sense. Piotr had died. Now it was simply Vigo's turn. He imagined his sister coming to work the next morning and pushing her way through the crowd, only to find his lifeless form sprawled on the parking lot. Suddenly, the heat of Oleska's body was gone. The hand lifted from his neck. Vigo gasped, pulling down air. He stared at the sky, then sat up, fully expecting Oleska to pummel him back down. But Oleska didn't, and Vigo slid off the hood, leaning against the fender to keep himself from falling. The skin on his neck felt twisted where Oleska had grabbed it. Cool air seeped into his wet armpits. He looked down. His good jacket was ripped along the seam. Oleska was making circles now, his hand laced behind his head, as if arresting himself. A part of Vigo still wanted to stab him, to leave Oleska's bloody carcass on the cement, but another part, the part that knew rather than felt, understood this was a test. Short of actually slitting Oleska's throat, more fighting would get Vigo nowhere. Chances were Oleska's cuts would heal and Sonia would side with her lover, and it would be Vigo who goes to jail, Vigo who would lose everything. No, there was a reason he had worn his law school clothes, not the flat jacket and boots. It was Oleska who was the two-bit, shit-for-brains Ponce, the low-life hustler of skin and hearts, not Vigo. Oleska stopped his pacing. "I'm warning you," he said, cocking a finger. "Come back again and I'll..." "Shut up," Vigo told him. "You don't talk to me like that, you dry piece of shit. Shut up. You're going to leave this place." "The factory? I'm not going anywhere." "Yes, you are. And not just the factory, but the capital. You're going someplace else and never coming back." "You think you're a goddamn nutcase if you think that." Vigo released his hold on the fender and planted his feet. His breath was coming full now, like a cool, clean wind across his brain. You don't talk to her, see her, not the baby, ever. Or I make things very, very difficult. Oleska scoffed again. "You can't do that," he said, shaking his head. "You're nothing, nobody." "For now, but this time next year, I'll be out of school, a prosecutor for the people, and there'll be a baby with your face, your blood. I'm guessing that when we interview other girls and we start asking around, we'll find others. We'll see who's the nobody then, comrade. You'll go to jail. At the very least, you'll be sent to a work camp, and I don't think they'll let you keep the long hair." Oleska ran his fingers through his greasy locks as he paced out another circle, and Vigo knew he'd wagered right. Sonia wasn't the first to be taken advantage of. Oleska stopped, dropping his hands, his breath audible. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but didn't. Instead, he stared at the cement at Vigo's feet, his black eyes darting back and forth. A change came over his face, and his jaw clenched. Vigo knew what he saw there, relished it. Fear. He'd seen it on his cousin's face that evening in the park, and then on the soldiers as Pieter's steel body lay on the gravel. The official report ruled that his cousin's death was an unfortunate accident. The soldier had been reassigned, never heard from again. Vigo had been too young to do anything about it then. He was just a kid. Not now. Get the hell out of my way, Oleska growled, knocking Vigo's shoulder as he moved towards the car. The sedan door was still open. Oleska dropped into the front seat, slamming the door behind him, and the engine roared to life. Vigo saw Oleska's pale knuckles grip the steering wheel. The sedan pulled out of the lot, not bothering to slow for the speed bump at the entrance, scraping the front bumper and popping sparks. Woo!
Welcome back to the stage, Allison. All right. Let's give it up for our host, my host of pie. Thank you for having us. Y'all are always so gracious. All right. Next up. Oh, also, I want to, here comes the clap. I want to say, it's Danial. We have an amazing anthology coming out that Danial is in, and the launch for that is May 15th? 15th.
Yes, it's a
At Blue Cypress Books. We have a whole assortment of New Orleans writers in there, including Liz Brina, Brad Bouchard, Carolyn Hembry, Maurice Carlos Ruffin will be in there, Daniel's in there. So put it on your calendars now, because it is a Friday? Monday. Monday. So if you really love Daniel's reading, which you will, and you want to see him again, which you will, that's another event, yeah. Cool. Danial W.K. Lee is a third-generation refugee, queer, Cantonese-American born in Kuching, Malaysia. He earned his Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing at the New School, and his debut collection of poetry, Anatomy of Want, was published by Queer Mojo Rebel Sartori Press in 2019. Danial makes New Orleans his home with his head-turning whippet, Camden. Find out more about him at danialwklee.com or follow him at StrongPlum on Instagram at Danial Saudade.
Sure.
You can pronounce it. Just fix it.
Saudade or Saudade.
Okay. On Twitter. Give it up for Danial.
Thanks everyone for coming. Thank you in particular Luminal Lit for having me. I'm delighted, of course, to be here. Got a little bit of personal housekeeping that I have to do. One, I just need to thank my benefactor level Patreon patron, Shane Lucas, who supports me in that regard. And before I read my own poetry, I kind of like to shine a spotlight on a queer BIPOC poet that my audience may not have heard before. So first I'm going to read a piece by a recent Lambda Literary Award nominee for transgender poetry, Paul Tran, for their book, All the Flowers Kneeling. It's called Progress Report. I had a new form. The new form said, name of survivor. The new form renamed me. The new form was a form of renaming. Renaming gave me a new form. The new form said, relevant history. History could be relevant. History could be irrelevant. History had a form. History was a form of renaming. The new form said daily function. Days could be measured by and a measurement of history. Function could be defined by and a definition of history. Both had a form. Both were a form of renaming. The new form said identifying triggers. Click of the key turning in the lock of the door. The new form said identifying recurring memories, repetition of one foot placed in front of the other. The new form said identifying survival strategies, pulling the string I thought was for the light. I marked rationalization, ceiling fan whirling like helicopter blades. I marked denial, odor of Heineken and pubic sweat. I marked fantasizing about the future, altar where my mother and I knelt before Ngai Kong Taitim. I marked obsessing about the past, fresh oranges arranged in a glass bowl. I marked compartmentalizing, hallway from the living room to the bedroom. I marked dissociating, my bed stripped of sheets. I marked not eating, stack of high school yearbooks. I marked compulsive eating, gym uniform embroidered with my name. I marked not sleeping, cling of a science fair trophy hitting the floor. I marked compulsive sleeping, poem I wrote in 5th grade rhyming the word heart with the word start. I marked avoiding sex, photograph of me sitting next to my father. I marked compulsive sex, photograph of a 98, 93 Mazda MP3 he reportedly turned into an ice cream truck. I marked humor, holes where the nails had been in the wall. I marked self-harm, wind through the windows. I marked caregiving, alarm clock unplugged. I marked drug use, the room emptied even of time. I marked staying busy, the air as if on fire. I marked controlling others, piles of things to keep and piles of things to throw away. I marked perfectionism, let go. I marked repeating abuse, the decision to keep nothing. I marked suppression, set free. I marked creating chaos, broom sweeping into the dustpan, the need to hold on. The new form said, ways this strategy is useful to me. I choose a new start. The new form said, ways this strategy is damaging to me. I choose a new heart. The new form said, some things I want to change are, I left the field blank. Change me. I left the field. Change me. I left the blankness. Change me. The blank field was my answer. This one's called But, B-U-T, not a second T. This was just published in Stone Pacific Zine online. It's a little bit of a list poem. A window pane once, a shotgun once, Mylar apology balloon once, green Marshall Field shopping bag once, bone chill once, the brine once, summer gazpacho once, a blue shirt with rolled sleeves on the floor once, standard once, sip once, frame once, gravel once, excuse once, fade once, port of call once, Palestine once, tongue in ear once, uninterrupted steam room once, blue movie once, 1995 once, venison and gratin once, handcuff once, power ballad once, 4-point play once, 1787 Chateau Margaux down the pant leg once. Discount department store clothes once. Midnight Itch once. Glissade down the summit once. Met Gala once. Razor shave once. Camouflaged and naked light once. The human shore once. Salted duck yolk once. The older one once. Reasons to stay once. Dunkin' Donuts parking lot hustler once. Knocking down the 710 split once. Sequin once. Stay of execution once. Put on once. Pearl River Delta once. Death Row Meal once. Button Smasher once. Decanted once. Cowl once. Calla lilies once. Crowbar once. His Grace once. Asylum once. Fried frog legs once. Belmont Rocks once. An open fly once. Right swipe once. Jackknife once. Avenge once. A tall glass of yes once. Post-season once. Tenderized once. Solar flare once. Starry night once. Chicken and Dewey once. My Baby by Missy Vaughn Next Door once. The Crease once. Tail pinched, head sucked once. New York without scaffolding once. New Orleans without potholes once. Rex once. Regret sex once. The recipe once. All things once, but yours once. All right, I'm gonna get a little political. This one's called Doom Scrolling. Rolodex of triggers propelled by headlines like gondola oars. Florida Senate approves highly contested Don't Say Gay bill. International mining company destroyed indigenous land, spied on reporters in Guatemala. Tornadoes kill 7 in Iowa. Horrors garnish the clickbait, welcome warnings, translucent rectangles, feigned sensitivity get smeared away. Our eyes are the fish's gaping maws, skull meat punctured, hooked from inside gathered sounds. Blinking, handcuffed, tongue arrests its clucking. Ukraine condemns atrocities as Russia bombs maternity hospital. U.S. releases mentally ill torture survivor held at Guantanamo for 20 years. Confirmed global COVID-19 death toll passes 6 million. Now's not the time to be ferocious. If Russia stops fighting, there will be no war. But if Ukraine stops fighting, there will be no Ukraine. What we're seeing is a national, well-funded effort to attack and eradicate trans youth and trans lives. Our dependency on oil means we depend on tyrants. Jockeying for feelings like glitter glazed throws, a banal carnival revelry, better off getting off. Cherry trees. Starts with an epigraph. On September 24th, 2020, the Trump administration executed Christopher Villalba, the first person in more than 70 years to have been federally slain for crimes committed as a teenager. They became my cherry trees, Mama. I could not, gun in hand, guilty as Washington's hatchet, make truth a virtue. I want to say my cruelty ended there on the dirt road where Stacy and Todd crumpled as only bodies can when pierced with bullets. That redemption started then. But I know that when we snatch lives, those who love them hold them as embers, the burning I stuffed into their fists. And it all became your burden. Death row, your burden. Commissary allowance, your burden. Long drives to prison for prison visits, your burden. Every day I breathe your burden. If you are reading this, you know I've at last walked dead. An eye executes an eye, so everyone sees blood. The law does not recognize forgiveness. Maybe one day your love will change things. Insurrection on January 6, 2021. Had it been black indignation leaning into self-righteousness, flag-draped black fury brandishing firearms, scaling sandstone, smearing shit, a tear gas cloud large as a zip code would have bloomed like cotton, cloaking live rounds, piercing pounds of melanated flesh into immodest bloodbaths that pundits would opine and assign roles of innocent, instigator, justified, bystander, for our very own production of Gate of Heavenly Peace, pronounced Tiananmen, our very own brutal satire. Hookup ad. If I were actually headless, just torso and below, rendered in pixels as chiseled and convincing by bathroom light, maybe the onlookers would let the porno unfold, genuflecting themselves between my knees, tongues taking the host, my ass, the cathedral they crave entrance, and like heaven depended on it, pretend that upon the tap, this face avowed, the hard-ons don't die at the wink of an almond eye. This one's called Dating / Apps. Like the death strut of chickens relieved of their heads, their rounded corner squares shimmy before their deletion. I may have gone too far, aiming my thumb like a bayonet to end these truces between me and Cupid's match targets. But isn't this the first declaration of seriousness? A virtue signal for when the eyes stop wandering. Allegedly, so does the aimless heart. Recklessly, no other way, I make a new armistice, stashing away sharp edges, today the kitchen eyes, to give way to a more tender gaze, and leaving for others to chase the dragon, the ferocious heroine of feeling wanted. Where the sidewalk ends. There's a word in here, dendrochronologist. Dendrochronology is the study of, or is determining an age of a tree by the roots. In New Orleans, feast and banquets yield in the southern live oak's splayed hips. The concrete jumbled as though branches gloved with resurrection fern had pried up and tossed slabs aside like mahjong tiles. Booby traps smashing faces squarely nailed to smartphones. I bet those trees howl to their roots at the human animal and its resigned governments, telegraphing their glee beneath South Carrollton Avenue, swaying to fake a breeze, mocking our gullibility. And what more than strange fruit persuaded them long ago of our pitiful hubris, our banal arrogance? Generation's name for whatever comes after Z will expire before the dendrochronologists, marveling at a clean slice of trunk like a Christmas ham, count its growth rings to determine age of death, its widest zero, its number of fucks left. I didn't really time my my reading, so I'm just going to read a few more from the book. I happen to have a few copies. If you are interested, it is called Anatomy of Want. Unfit. There are teeth marks all over where you left, my house shivering, a door chewed like leather or familiar despair. I do not blame you for assailing me with tears as you left, that 1 a.m. phone call, bleeding another man's voice, still ringing your heart. You knew what he was, is not a rival, nor you one too. I'm sorry you think I could be your champion, ease you off the world without a lover or better days. Forgive me if you wish, for giving you hope. I did not promise or wish to send you away in mourning when the sun resurrected. I am no mightier or wiser than wanting to save you near me. So mistake for weakness if you must. I cannot, with you loving, rescue you from you. Furnish. What are you doing here, boy, when there are men out there whose pockets are train rides to Tripoli, antique carpets in the souks of Marrakesh? You are like clockwork, fading hours beneath my hands, keeping me and my poverty's company. So why not have any of those architects of sonnets or prodigies of song willing to exonerate you from death? I, artless with verse, affording little in the visible world, have only this. If you have nothing, no house, no shadow, and I, no house and only a shadow, should I give you my shadow? Make it your home. Okay, one more. Okay, two more. Apocryphal. Before the salt comes and melts another season, let's just lay down on this serenade of snow. You where only letters reach, and I a place with no post office. If this were a rehearsal for being together, perhaps the impressions of our bodies would appear less like smudges on winter's cheek and closer to a footprint, evidence of a doe, suggesting beyond speculation that we at least were. And finally, making dinner for Mark Bradbury. Fingers untucked, mint leaves rolled into a stubby cigar. Your blade pensively sliced a chiffonade sprinkled over last night's tagine, and a smile weeks later. It will take patience, one or both of us said, wondered, the cutting or the craving. Thank you.
Copies of his book, and you have your totes with you as well.
I do.
Show them off for a sec. These are so cheeky. So, see Daniel, if you would like one of those. They are always a crowd favorite. We're going to do a quick intermission. We've got spots left for open mic if you want to sign up. And I want to do a quick plug. So if you identify as a writer or as someone who plays music or as someone who makes food, we have our literary festival on the 17th of June at the Art Park next to Zeitgeist. We have applications open. If you are new to writing or if you're a veteran writer with 1 million books, apply. It's open to literally anyone. So the application is bit.ly/apply2 LitFest. And we've got positions open for readers, performers, musicians, and vendors. If you make art, if you make jewelry, if you make pie, and you want to be a vendor, we have a sliding scale vendor fee, so it's not outrageous, crazy expensive.
Is the link posted on our Insta or our Facebook?
It is indeed. It's in both. It's so amazing. We also currently have a broadside contest, a poetry contest. Exactly 0 people have submitted poems, so your chances of winning are pretty high. It's crazy. So if you want to win $100 and 10 beautiful broadsides made by our friend Cameron at Tilted House, you know they're going to be letterpressed, and they will be on sale, and you'll be featured at the Lit Festival.
Yeah.
So all you need to do is send us $10 on Venmo or PayPal. This is also posted on our Instagram and Facebook. And then send us your work, and we would love to help you get those broadsides made. And then lastly, we have a Zoom workshop, a movement and poetry workshop with Andrea Penseca, who's a CWW grad and a local New Orleanian. It's on Zoom. The sign up is also on our Instagram, bit.ly/liminalworkshop-April. So it's kick off poetry month with a little bit of movement, a little bit of improv, and a little bit of poetry writing. All right. 10-minute intermission, buy some pie, buy a drink, say hello to our beautiful writers that are in the room, and we'll see you in 10 minutes.